Hi, I'm U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, and I'm back on The Elephant in the Room.
Welcome to The Elephant in the Room. I'm your host, Cyrus Pearson, and Sophie's over there cruising past episodes. How have they been, Sophie?
So good.
We have our first repeat customer.
I like that. That's
mentioned.
cute.
She is back. Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee was on episode 103, and today we follow up on a couple of the things we mentioned there and find out some all-new stuff.
She was a repeat senator on the podcast, but this was my first time sitting down with her. I was so excited.
So what did you think?
Oh, did not disappoint. I absolutely love her. I love her politics. I love the way she dresses. I mean, I think she's just like a fabulous person.
You know, she is a powerful senator, but she also is easy to talk to.
Very. She's so down to earth. I mean, you know, she's a mom, she's a grandmother, and she really wears her heart on her sleeve, and I respect that.
Well, let's hear from her. Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee. Thank you for joining us again on The Elephant in the Room, our first repeat guest.
Well, I'm delighted to be invited back because that means it must have been pretty good.
It was good. You actually changed my life.
You enjoyed it, or
I now pronounce it pecan, and I will for the rest of my life.
Of course. That's what it is.
And it's only because of you. We did touch upon last time you were on that you baked cookies each week and you gave them to your granddaughter. What was your latest cookie of the week?
Oh, my goodness. Chocolate chip cookies are always the favorite. But last weekend, we made lemon butter pound cake cupcakes with cream cheese frosting.
She is no joke.
That sounds amazing.
It was pretty good. It really was. And, you know, she's gotten, my little granddaughter loves making pizza.
Okay.
And so it's just really so precious. You know, she likes to put on the pepperoni and kind of spread the cheese, and it's really fun. So Saturday we had pizza and salad and lemon cupcakes for dessert, and she gets so excited because she's got two older cousins that are 14 and 15.
Okay.
And she will say, "I'm making a treat for Jack and Chase." She just loves them, and she will talk a lot about her cousins.
Do you wood fire the pizzas? Do you bake them? How do you cook them?
Put it in the oven, 425.
Wow. She's eating better
I
than
am
me.
so impressed with how much you bake and cook and are able to spend so much time with family. I mean, it's the most important part, but do you ever sleep, Senator?
Not much. I'm not a big sleeper, but when I am here, I'm working.
Yeah.
And then I generally spend Mondays or Fridays, whatever we have off, in the state, because every year I visit with each of our 95 counties. And I think that's important to do, to find out what is important to people.
Right.
And get a good grip on where they want your attention to be on their behalf as you represent them. So I try to take that time on Saturdays when usually I'll work part of the day on Saturday, but I'll take part of it for the grandkids, and it's always fun when I can go see one of the boys' sporting events, or you know, on Sunday I cook Sunday lunch for the kids, so that's our family time together.
That's so nice.
So I'll do that in the wee hours on Saturday night, and you get into a routine with it. So like anything else in life, once you establish that routine, then it becomes easier.
Right.
There's so much to get to, so let's try to zoom through some of this. We'll get back to those 95 counties and what the people are telling you, but you teased us last time, episode 103. You said there's an amoeba cookie. You gave us the reason it's called the amoeba cookie, but you said there's a funny story behind why it's named there and that you would tell us.
Oh, and it has to do with my kids and the fact that I would make these chocolate chip cookies that are done with brown sugar and butter, and they were never a round shape. And they would say, "Why aren't our cookies round?" And I would say, Because ours aren't cookies, they're amoebas. And so having amoebas became a thing with my kids' friends.
I'm not really convinced you eat all the foods you make.
I don't.
You stay in amazing shape, and I just wanted to find out, is that a genetic thing, or do you actually work out or anything?
It's part genetics and part exercise, and making that time. Since I am up early, I generally get some exercise in the morning, and try to eat right. And no, I don't eat everything I cook. And I'm not a big lunch eater.
Okay.
And generally, I'll skip lunch. I feel like if I eat a big lunch, it slows me down for my afternoon. So I kind of skip that.
Do you have breakfast?
Not much.
Yeah.
I will sometimes completely skip breakfast and then do soup or nuts or a cup of yogurt at lunch, cup of soup.
Right. I've actually heard a lot of senators say the same thing, that breakfast and lunch, it's hard. I mean, you really get that afternoon crash.
Yeah, and, I would rather save that calorie and then have a piece of chocolate at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with a cup of coffee.
Yes, yeah.
Kind of get my second wind going.
Well, I also see you always on the go, walking around the Capitol. I don't think a lot of our listeners know, how big the tunnels are. And so I always see you walking. And speaking of looking good and walking, you have the most killer high heels in the Senate. I am a high heels girl. And so every time, I love that you have the sparkly ones. I mean, I feel like I've started to keep track because you always look fabulous.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I say that running in high heels should be an Olympic sport.
Totally.
Because walking the number of miles we do a day, you rack up the miles in those heels.
You have one of the great fashion senses we've seen up here, and anybody watching on YouTube will be able to see that.
Or Rumble.
Yeah, or Rumble. Let's talk about your husband, though. One of the things he's into is bow ties. I think he did the bow tie Bible. I wore a bow tie in honor of him.
I noticed that bow tie. Yes, he did. He founded the Bow Tie Society and wrote the book, The Bow Tie Bible. And that's a fun little project that he works on. He's kind of intrigued by it. And he even got Chuck Grassley in a bow tie once upon a moment.
Really?
Wow.
Yes, and you should see Chuck Grassley in that bow tie.
He's a sharp dresser,
talk
too.
about dapper.
Oh my gosh. I love bow ties.
So did you encourage him to go after this, or do you kind of look at his thing?
It was just something that happened quite by accident. He likes to wear bow ties. And somebody had questioned him about it. One time said, "Why do you always wear a bow tie?" And he looked at the lady and he said, "Did you not know that I founded the Bow Tie Society?" Which was totally a joke. He hadn't. And then the kids went, when he was telling the children this story, they go, "Dad, that's a great idea. Let's go pull that website right now."
That's amazing.
Isn't that? Yeah, fun
that
story.
Is amazing. Let's quickly talk about March is Women's History Month. We touched upon that a little last time you were here. One of the things you told us about is how around the college age, they didn't want to let you sell books, clearly because you were a woman.
Right.
Can you sum that up? It's hard to believe to somebody
Well,
like
it
me.
is. And today's environment is very different from what I was facing in the 70s. And those of us who were coming out of college in the 70s, high school and college, the opportunities that were given to us were treated very differently than the opportunities and the doors that were open to men. And so you had to kind of make your own way, which I did with selling books. And then, of course, as we talked, helped the Southwestern Company, which is there in Nashville, start a women's division. I was a sales manager. And I think one of the important things is realizing that many of us had to kind of raise our hand and say, "No, I'm here, I can do this." And make those opportunities for ourselves. And then when those doors were open, you always had to overperform. And because of the expectation, you had to exceed expectations. And it's so unfortunate, but that's really what we faced. And sometimes when I'm talking to younger women, I'll think, I'm not sure you realize how tough this was to break these barriers and to open these doors and to stand up against guys who would be dismissive of you, would contradict you, would speak over you, and would try to take credit for an idea that you had brought to the table.
Now, you're breaking the glass ceiling there. So did you look at that as this is just simply unfair? Or did you look at it as I'm one of the few who's getting to do this, so at least I've got some piece of it, or both? Or
I looked at it as a challenge. And I thought, why can't women do this? And I was so fortunate to have parents and grandparents. My grandmother was really quite a trailblazer who just were adamant, you're as good as anybody else. You can do this. If you're qualified, you're qualified. And don't accept something that is shut down for you. Kind of make your way and do it politely, but still make your point. And that's what many women had to do. It's certainly what I had to do when it came to working in a sales organization and charting that path. But the good thing is, once you do it, then it's easier for the people that are coming behind you. And I've kind of accepted that as a challenge to break those barriers and to see more women raise their hand and run for public office. In Tennessee, when I was in the state Senate, I was the only Republican female in the state Senate. Yes.
Wow.
And now I look at these wonderful women that are filling those seats, and I'm just so proud of them.
Right.
And women that are in our General Assembly, and I'm so proud of them. And then we have since I came to Congress, we have had two women, Diane Black, who had filled the seat for the 6th Congressional District, and then she retired. And now we have Diana Harshbarger, who is in Tennessee's 1st District. I'm just so grateful that they stepped up and ran and won.
I'm not a spring chicken. I'm nearing 50, but it seems to me even that this is something that may have taken place 100 years, 150 years ago. I mean, we're talking the 70s. It's
people
so
don't
hard.
realize it just happened.
I don't have a grasp of this concept. I haven't, had overt personal examples of this. What do you think the state of opportunities now are? Are we almost at what you'd call a finish line, or how are we doing?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
I'd love to hear about that.
When you look at the makeup of the Senate, and we've got 25 women, and we should have 51.
The country's nearly 50-50.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay. That's right. So it just shows you how important it is for women to raise their hand and continue to run. I'm delighted that we do have Nella Domenici in New Mexico that's going to be running for a Senate seat this cycle. I think that that's a really good thing. I appreciate that. And the thing is, I encourage women to begin to look for opportunities in their communities. Young women, to whether it's a school board or a commission that is there in their city or their county, volunteer and get involved, and then run for office when you feel like it's right for you and your family. But start to make your way into this. Work in party politics. Start to build a network, and then prepare yourself so that one day when that opportunity presents, you go, yeah, I've got some groups that would support me and help me, and then you're ready to move forward.
Do you feel like it's almost more important now than ever? It feels like sometimes we've moved backwards. There's almost a new attack on women with a lot of gender ideology issues. I mean, you're seeing it in women's sports play out. So would you agree that now is really almost the most important time for women to stand up?
I had a lady this last weekend ask me, where were the national women's organizations when it comes to all of the human trafficking and sex trafficking that's taking place on the border? And she had been active with one of these groups at one point, and she said, I can't believe they don't speak up, and I can't believe they're not speaking up about men and women's sports. And I reminded her, I said, well, once upon a day in a hearing, there was someone who wanted to be a Supreme Court justice, and I said, can you give me the definition of the word woman? And they declined, saying they weren't a biologist. And, it is, that is right now the left and their push, they're trying to diminish what it means to be a woman. Mm-hmm. And trying to diminish the opportunities and things that are there for women. And I have so many friends who I wouldn't call conservative at all. They're not Republican. They are independents. Mm-hmm. Some of them are Democrats. But it is the men and women's sports that absolutely infuriates them, because they've worked so hard to make certain that Title IX is there and that girls have these opportunities, and they've watched their granddaughters and their daughters as they go through training and prepping for competition, and all of a sudden it is like, well, no, there might be a guy that gets this trophy or this scholarship.
Who have always had rights.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and it really troubles them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating.
Let's shift so we can get as much as possible in here and talk about Tennessee. And I want to say the country music legend George Strait is famous for saying all his exes live in Texas, so he hangs his hat in Tennessee. Now, am I wrong in observing that it seems like a lot of people are moving to Tennessee as some kind of refuge from other places in America?
We see it every day.
Okay.
There are so many Californians that are in the Nashville area because of the healthcare and the entertainment industry, and they have moved their families to Tennessee, and they have a crash pad in LA or out in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, somewhere, and we do see that a lot. And then in the Upper East part of the state and up on the plateau, you have a lot of people from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maryland that have come into the state. A lot of retirees, because we have no state income tax in Tennessee.
Like Florida.
And that's because we have somebody, when she was a state senator, that led that fight and kept
She sounds amazing.
and kept us income tax free. So yes, you do have a lot of people. And I have a friend who walks every morning in our neighborhood, and she wears a T-shirt that says, "Don't California my Tennessee."
Right.
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask what the draw to Tennessee is, but it's self-evident after you talking about that. But the general attitude of people coming to Tennessee, are they leaving their politics behind, or are they bringing them with them?
They refer to themselves as refugees, and they'll come up to you and say, "Oh, I'm so happy I can meet you," whether I'm at something for the grandkids or, some event in the community or at church or some grocery store. And they'll just come up and introduce themselves and say, "We're not like those lefties in California."
Well, that's good.
Don't think ill of us. We're refugees. We're escapees.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing about Tennessee, it borders something like 7 states, I believe.
Right.
Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas. I mean, that's a little
impressive.
mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is.
I told Sophie that. I would like to talk real quick about the border, and this is kind of terrifying to me, the southern border. So I'm going to try to connect the dots here, and hopefully somewhere along this way you can tell me where I'm wrong. Since Biden took office, repealed policies, on day one, 9 million people estimated have entered the country illegally. And estimates are this could easily be 10 million. Your fellow Senator Bill Hagerty compared it in the State of the Union response as 8 times the size of the entire Russian army. So it's a huge amount. We've got about 1 in 35 people in the U.S. right now are here illegally. So I'm on track so far, right?
You're on track. That's right. And I think adding to that, in his first 100 days, Joe Biden took 94 executive actions that opened the border and weakened immigration law.
Okay. So let's get to this next dot. Those people will go probably to every state, but most likely will end up in either sanctuary cities or bigger cities that are Democrat run. I would assume.
Chicago, New York.
Right.
That's right. When it's so interesting when you talk to them at the border and say, where do you want to go? Denver, Chicago, New York, they'll tell you what cities they are going to. And this is because the cartels have set up operations on U.S. soil, and they have hubs that are drug trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking gangs that are working out of these hubs. And so a lot of these people have to work for the cartel to pay their fee. So they'll tell you where they're going.
Boy, there are so many aspects of this.
The cartels are getting richer.
Yes.
While Americans are getting poorer, essentially.
My next dot here, the census takes into account every person here legally as a resident or not, and the census will take place again in 6 years. And by that time, you can imagine many of these people will have had babies, adding even more to the count. Am I still on track so far?
Yes.
Okay, so here's where the dots come together. The census is then used to calculate the number of House of Representative memberships to which each state is entitled. The House is obviously the other body besides the Senate that makes up Congress. And it also touches the presidential election because the Electoral College votes are allocated among the states based on the census.
Yes.
So basically, even in a scenario where you make sure 0 people who have entered illegally are allowed to vote, we're sitting in the middle of a situation where the damage has maybe already been done. And for a legislative solution where I think you kind of signed on to not count these, you basically would have to have some sort of Republican majority between now and then. Otherwise, it's kind of a conflict of interest to Democrats to vote against something that's going to keep them in power. I mean, do I have that off?
You've got that right. And see what they're trying to do, and I think it really aggravated them when we started to talk about this. They are doing this to backfill population that they're losing in blue states. You look at California losing 700,000 people last year, and congressional districts are 825,000 people. So it's a matter of doing the numbers. They've already lost some, and they're trying to backfill. This is why it is so important that we pass the bill and that we continue to bring it up, continue to vote on it, and get people on the record that illegal aliens cannot be counted for the purpose of apportionment in the Electoral College. And you will see us continue to push that effort because that does change the balance of power. And you will notice, I think it was a giveaway on what they were doing when you start looking at 9 million people, more population than 38 of our states. And these big blue city mayors that are sanctuary cities, they were not saying to Joe Biden, close the border, we can't handle this. They were saying, send us more money so we can handle this. So that shows you right there what they are doing.
It's corrupt.
It's crazy. But let's imagine we even had a second term and nothing happened. We continued the same path. You'd have 1 out of every 18 people in the country illegally.
Yeah.
And it's just by doing nothing, like legally not doing border enforcement.
That's right. And it is breaking the law. I had a Tennessean ask me why this was not a crime and why everybody that is agreeing to open this border, why they're not called on for having broken the law. And, 2 tiers of justice make people really upset. And when they see that, they see it as basically unfair. And they see these people coming in the country illegally, and they're waiving their plane tickets. They've got an iPhone, they've got food, they've got shelter, they've got clothing. You've got veterans being kicked out of hotels, and those that are illegally in. You've got school kids that are being kicked out of schools, and those that are illegally in the country are using those schools and those activity centers, and they're saying, hey, wait a minute, we're taxpayers. I do believe that as we look at the 24 election, the border, that open southern border, and what is happening with this out of control illegal entry into the country is going to be item number one.
Yeah. Something that you said on, I think it was social media or on all the many TV hits that you do, which again is so impressive, is they are trying to make illegal immigration legal.
That's right.
I mean, it's as simple as that.
They came up with an app.
Right.
And said, just use the app. Let us know you're coming.
Waltz right in.
And then you look at parole status. Now, parole is different from asylum. And typically, Trump, Obama, go on back through the rest of them, and they will have paroled about 5,000, 6,000 people a year. Joe Biden paroled 800,000 in 2022 and 1.2 million in 2023, and this gives them federal benefits and a work permit when they get parole status.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
Well, thank you for spending so much time on that. Just to keep this moving, you mentioned your county's tour. What are the people telling you they're concerned about?
Mm-hmm. They're concerned about the border and the drugs coming in the country, and about the human and sex trafficking and the gangs and the people from countries of interest, terrorists that have come into this country. They talk about crime in their communities, and they relate it right to the border, because we have communities that have gangs that have never had any kind of gangs or crime. And the other thing is Bidenflation. Inflation, the price of groceries, the price of gas at the pump. Farmers talk a lot about the cost of diesel and fertilizer and getting crops in the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I bought a sandwich, a Diet Coke, and some cheese sticks the other day, and it was over $15, and it kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
I actually, with the way prices have been, that actually sounds like a decent
I don't
price.
understand. We were energy independent, which made it cheaper to transport everything, and the prices didn't rise. I mean, under Biden, we are on no track to get energy independence, are we?
No, he is trying to diminish our ability to go out and work with fossil fuels. And you don't realize how much is tied to fossil fuels and all the polymers that are used in plastics, in polyester clothing, all of that is coming from petroleum and hydrocarbons. And so people need to think long and hard about what they're doing here. And by the way, those electric vehicles don't work in bad weather.
And they come from communist China.
All those batteries and all those minerals.
Where do we go? Do we go to...
Speaking of communist China, let's talk about TikTok.
Yes.
TikTok is a huge issue. It's something you're very vocal about for multiple reasons. One of the reasons is it being owned by communist China. And then I'd like to talk about the children's safety aspect, because this is something you're passionate about with social media in general.
If your ears aren't perking up, this is such a big issue. The senator has actually been, I think, receiving death threats about this.
Yes, we have. We've had Capitol Police have to investigate some of these, and we've got one child that they had to call the parents in the school because these kids are calling the office and threatening to kill themselves, kill the president, kill me, do harm, and you can't do that. And these parents, the interviews that I've given, I've said, parents, wake up. You need to be checking, see if your child is a part of this, because this is a crime to call and make those threats like that. And with TikTok, it is important for people to realize TikTok is owned by ByteDance, as you said. ByteDance has a board position, or the Chinese Communist Party has a board position with ByteDance. Under the national security law of China, they are entitled, the CCP is entitled to information from TikTok that covers the data of everybody on it. Now, when TikTok gets into your phone They have spyware there. They follow every one of your keystrokes, every app you use. They collate all of that data. They take it into Beijing, where they store it, where they manipulate that data, and where they are basically building a virtual you, which is a copy of you and your activity on your device. So, this is the reason we're saying do not put TikTok on your phone. It may come across to you as entertainment, but it is a piece of Chinese propaganda and spyware. And what they're doing is surveilling you and your activity. Now, as a mom and a grandmom, I don't want my kids on TikTok. I don't want the Chinese Communist Party to know who their friends are, who their relationships are. I don't want them to be a part of something that can be weaponized. And as we have seen, when the House got ready to take that vote, the House was flooded with phone calls from people because they could log on to TikTok. A warning came up. It said, contact your member of Congress, touch this alert, and we will connect you to the office of your member of Congress. They're doing that with the Senate now. We got 1,400 calls within the last week, and some of those are threatening calls. Well, when an office receives a death threat, a personal bodily harm threat, we are required to turn that over to Capitol Police. Capitol Police are required to investigate that. The FBI investigates the ones that are against the president, and of course, these are. This shows you how it can be weaponized, and I think that TikTok actually made the point many of us have been making about TikTok by weaponizing it and having all these kids, all these TikTok users calling and saying, you're taking away my job, you're taking away my entertainment,
Well, and I think a part of it is I mean, this is a form of social media that the algorithm is so specifically targeted to people to keep them there. And people threatening to kill themselves to stay on an app, I mean, there is an addictive property here. I mean, that in of itself to me is dangerous for our youth. And you've been very outspoken, not just about TikTok, but the dangers of social media in general.
Yes.
And I'd like to hear you speak about the Kids Online Safety Act. This is a bill that you introduced to keep children safe online. Can you tell us about that?
I certainly can. Dick Blumenthal and I have worked on this together. He's the senator from Connecticut, and we've worked for about 4 years on this legislation. And what it would do is put the duty of care, require social media platforms to design for safety and establish a duty of care, have a toolbox for kids and parents to keep themselves safe online, open up the algorithms so that parents can see what the exposure is, and then allow kids to set those like they want them. Have a channel, a dedicated portal that they can report bad actors, pedophiles, drug dealers, videos on suicide, self-harm, eating disorders, and then require social media to take those bad actors off the platform, and also require them to go through an annual audit. We have 67 members of the Senate, all bipartisan, that are co-sponsors on this bill. And we have hundreds of organizations that are bipartisan that are supporting this legislation. And parents, principals, teachers, doctors, pediatricians, you name it, they're all saying something needs to be done. So many of the parents whose children have lost their lives, or maybe they met a drug dealer, or they met a human trafficker, or they did a challenge and they lost their life, or they were severely injured. They have worked with us because they don't want other parents and other families to go through this and children to lose their lives because of the exposure. And of course, the CDC and the Surgeon General have told us we have a mental health crisis with our young people, and we have 1 in every 3 girls, teenage girls, that have contemplated suicide because of depression.
Senator, time is flying. Unfortunately, we're hearing from your staff that we're out of time, but I can't let you leave without mentioning that there is some good stuff you can listen to online. You have your own podcast.
Yes.
It's called Unmuted with Marsha. You've had some great guests on. Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank
Yes.
is an example. Do you want to overrule your staff and talk about your podcast for just a sec?
Well, and I've got to go do one of those podcasts. But yeah, people can find us on social media at Marsha Blackburn and hope they'll listen in.
Already on YouTube. It is now coming out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud, so you can find it everywhere. Senator, thanks so much for coming back. It was an absolute pleasure.
Delighted to be your first return guest.
Yes, thank you.
Sophie, I was really pleased with how easy she was to talk to, and I don't think she spends a lot more than 15 or 20 minutes at interviews, so I think we kind of got a coup there.
Yeah, we are very blessed that she spent so much time with us because, yeah, like you said, she usually spends 15 to 20 minutes with people. I mean, senators, they're always on the go. They always have something else to do. So we're lucky.
And I really enjoyed the conversation. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, she's amazing. I want to go back to what you said during the episode that you bought a sandwich, 2 cheese sticks, and a Diet Coke.
Okay, well, it was 6 cheese sticks, but it was part of a meal.
6 cheese
Okay,
sticks. Those are called mozzarella sticks, not cheese sticks.
Okay, you put me on the spot. Sorry. And it was $15.16. And I was kind of like, this seems like a lot.
So that was in Richmond,
Virginia. Yes.
I have to be honest with you, that actually doesn't sound that expensive. For the prices that I've been paying for food,
Yeah.
that actually sounds like kind of a bargain these days. But that goes to show you do start to get used to prices as they get higher and higher.
Yeah.
And that's really unfortunate because it almost kind of lets Joe Biden off the hook for inflationary prices.
All I know is we're paying too much for things.
I mean, yes, it's
Our dollar
awful.
goes less.
Yeah.
And we talk to people week after week, and they're telling us why it's happening.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. If you like today's episode, please follow, subscribe, or simply like the podcast in your app so that you are notified the next time one comes out. I'm not really reading this, but I want to stay in order here. Mm-hmm. We are available on YouTube and Sophie's favorite,
Rumble.
Knew that was coming. If you'd like to watch the video version of the podcast, now credit is due. The Elephant in the Room is brought to you under the direction of U.S. Senator
John Barrasso.
of Wyoming. Executive producer is
Arjun Modi.
Fill in the blank. Show producer is
Carly Rapp.
Technical director is
Rashad Smith.
You nailed it. Thanks for listening, and until next time, this has been
The Elephant in the Room.